Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Blue Mondays, the number one podcast on the internet for telling Joe that he's wrong about everything.
No, that's right. That's wrong. That's the Glorio chat. This is the number 2 podcast for telling Jill he's wrong about everything.
I will graciously accept that. However, he is wrong about everything. Joe, this is a direct call out. You're wrong. With that business taken care of, this is a Eureka 7 rewatch podcast, and I am joined as always by my wonderful partner in crime, Aquagaze. Hi Aqua, how's it going?
Hello, I have good news. I've just received word that I'm going to get I'm going to get an internship at my favorite company, my favorite pirate terrorist surfer company, and they have an exclusive internship for me. I get to work the hours together with the crew, get a feel of what the work is like, and I'm excited to report on my experiences as I work through my internship.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to go just great.
Yes, it's going to be an amazing time. I'm definitely not going to get picked on by children and sexually harassed by women twice my age.
Hey, look, it's good work if you can get it, okay? That is a lead-in to say that this week we are looking at episode 5, Vivid Bit, and episode 6, Childhood. So there's no real preamble this time, so I'm going to say let's go straight into episode 5, shall we?
Indeed.
Okay, so you first, go on.
So our boy Renton is trying to get used to life aboard the Gekko, but obviously none of the Gekkostate members, including possibly Eureka, really want him around.
I think it's less that they don't want him around and more that they just kind of haven't decided what to do with him yet.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Like, his presence obviously disrupts some dynamics that have been established.
Yes, I mean,
it's clear that before Renton joined the Gekko, there was a certain agreed on accord between Talho, Holland, and Eureka. With basically being a couple, and Eureka being kind of like their adopted daughter, and now with their dumb kid is coming in.
That's certainly one way you could read it.
Well,
I think
very dysfunctionally, but
I think we'll talk a little bit more about that when it comes around, But let's concentrate on the beginning of the episode here, and we begin in flight with Renton and Eureka. They're still testing, which we saw the other week. I just want to say about this opening segment, some really good, weird and wacky faces.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, even though it's clear that the budget has taken a bit of a cut in comparison to the first 2 episodes, they're still doing a really good job at making Renton an incredibly animated and lively character.
Yeah, I mean, I think they bring... I would never call these episodes badly animated.
Right,
I think that they bring the stuff when it counts, and I think when it counts is in this opening sequence. We get some good flying stuff, we get some good character stuff here. We get the first appearance of our opening theme music, Gekko Go, the triumphant fanfare. I think that it's just a good scene to kind of remind us of the key dynamic, right, between Renton and Eureka. And just kind of establish that Eureka is still a super ace, amazing pilot, right?
Right. It sort of plays on the resentment Renton feels about the fact that he has been sort of, up until now, his journey has been that of the very typical hero who comes in, delivers the MacGuffin to the mysterious girl who falls out of the sky, and now he's just back to being reduced to being in the sidecar, and they sort of play on this, or at least vaguely tease at his sense of emasculation about the fact that he just has to sit in the sidecar and punch in the numbers and do the things that other people are telling him, while Eureka gets to do cool shit in the Nerve Ash.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they are treating him as an accessory, right? Mm-hmm. We kind of touched upon this a little bit in some of the previous episodes, but to them, to the Gekko crew, and even to Eureka to a certain extent, right, their interest is in how he complements her abilities, not really in him as a person.
I mean, that is represented by his drive, his MacGuffin.
Yeah.
Like, he is mostly just the kid that came with the MacGuffin that we need.
Right. Yeah. I think it's neat that we actually see Eureka smiling in this little piloting segment.
She's having a good time.
Yeah, she loves flying, clearly, And again, it's just those little things that are put in, that make her a little bit more than just your stock emotionless girl template. We do, of course, touch upon Renton being airsick here as well, which thankfully we don't see.
That's like another blow to his ego, right? Because he prides himself on his surfing skills, and now it turns out that once you play in the big leagues, that's something completely different. Similar to how you can take a boat out onto the lake, but once you start crossing the sea, seasickness becomes something else entirely.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good allegory for it, actually. I mean, the point is that clearly he is beyond his normal bounds, beyond anything he's experienced before, and he's not doing great with it. And this, in this opening scene, we also sort of get the beginning of the setup for what will be the next episode, but kind of it's the first real Renton versus Eureka's children moment, right? I just want to say that who do you like, guys who puke or guys who don't puke, is one of the most devastating burns of all time. It's just absolutely body.
I just especially like how Renton still has a glimpse of hope. He's like, oh, maybe she likes guys who puke. Oh, damn, she doesn't.
It just these children are putting the knife in immediately and then twisting it as hard as humanly possible,
as children are wont to do.
Yeah, yes. and Eureka kind of in her inimitable fashion takes it as a serious question, which makes it even more devastating, obviously. You know.
I mean, that sort of reflects to the way you talk to a kid, right? If a kid walked up to you and was like, do you like people who puke or do you like people who don't puke? You'd obviously be like, well, obviously I like people who don't puke. Puking is bad.
Right, but the difference is I don't think Eureka is saying it knowingly.
Right.
She's kind of saying she's doing it earnestly. And again, that's perhaps an illustration of how she doesn't necessarily understand that it's not a sincere question. It is a question.
That it's meant to be a dig at Renton.
She's an engineer. She doesn't understand or doesn't fully understand the purpose of the question being to needle him, and of course Renton, very upset about this, starts spouting some very shonen-y dialogue, which immediately gets him into further trouble.
Oh no, Miss Talho discovered my book of edgy poetry that I wrote in 8th grade.
I think this is so good, I mean, unfortunately we are not graced by the presence of G this week, so we don't have the 5-minute monologue about how Talho can step on him, but you can probably imagine it. But
yeah, too bad for Renton that Eureka does not have a vomiting fetish, but the writers sure have a humiliation fetish.
He really gets it in the neck here,
oh yeah,
I think it's a really good way to set, because we've seen a bit of Talho up to this point. We know she's kind of a classic tsundere. She's very snippy, very jealous, but this really sells how childish she is. How completely just petty and determined to lord it over him he is. It's a very strong characterization beat for a very shitty characterization, right?
I mean, it's very interesting, right? Because we've always approached this show from in the first 2 podcasts, we've very much approached the show as a metaphor for growing up. We get Renton out of his environment and surround him with adult authority figures he can learn from. But of course, the question is, how do you do that when all the authority figures around you are basically just maladjusted man-children?
Right. But I think even by the standards of the Gekkostate, Talho is incredibly...
I mean, that's the thing, right? It sets the show up as an ensemble show, because it's not just Renton who needs to learn from people around him and become an adult. It's the adults who also need to learn to, as I mentioned last time, take the responsibility towards the people looking up towards them, on how to be a good mentor, how to be a good inspiration
Yeah,
for Renton in this
and
case.
I think we do also see, in the subsequent scene, we do see the Gekkostate acting a bit more like adults. They're making money decisions. Hilda wants to buy the groceries, the parts, and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
I
Holland is
mean,
saying,
to briefly flash forward but in episode 6, like Holland literally says, that they need to take the responsibility of the adults in the room.
yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's any question that Holland knows that he is meant to be the adult in the room, and he does have a sense of responsibility. We know he cares about the crew, but he's practically Confucius compared to Talho here, who just is just like, I want the bling jewelry, I don't care about the normal stuff.
I just want to get slammed and
Yes,
buy nice stuff.
buy nice stuff, and
Yeah.
Holland is all no, or he doesn't necessarily say no, but he's like, we'll do it when we make more money, which is a fairly reasonable situation, and of course she's not happy with that, and what you were saying earlier here, we do begin to get some hints of resentment from Talho towards Eureka here, right? Because Holland is like, I'll go into town with Eureka and pick out the parts, and Talho's like, Eureka this, Eureka that, So, what's your read on that relationship here?
So my thing is like I wrote down in my notes that it's like, this is the weirdest love triangle ever, because like it's not a love triangle, but we get this idea of like, okay, Renton is in love with Eureka. Holland is kind of Eureka's father figure, who doesn't he needs Eureka in a certain sense, right? And then like there's the kids who want Eureka for themselves and don't want Renton to take her away. Then there's Talho, who like clearly thinks that Holland doesn't give her the attention she deserves because he's too busy with Eureka or Renton, and it's just a big mess of one person needing another one or putting another one on a pedestal, and not getting what they expect out of that relationship.
I guess the big question here is, do you think that Talho thinks that Eureka is a romantic rival?
No. I mean, no, absolutely. Like, I don't think that Talho thinks that Eureka is a like for Holland's affections, right?
You see, I'm not so sure.
Maybe she's like so insecure she feels like she's like the literal 14-year-old girl is a competitor, which would
it's
like
difficult
tell something about how immature she is, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say. I think that perhaps rationally she doesn't think of Eureka as a romantic competitor, but she's certainly jealous of the amount of attention and care that Holland gives to Eureka, right? Like, and it's difficult to say where kind of like affectionate jealousy crosses into romantic jealousy.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Because she craves attention, which is like nicely literalized by the fact that she is the cover girl of Gekkostate's zine.
Yes.
She's the one who literally gets the attention of the world on Gekkostate.
Yes.
And that makes it interesting to see like how she behaves towards Renton in this episode.
Yeah, I mean,
she's looking for attention in the wrong places.
I mean, I think she's just looking for attention in all places, right?
That's the thing. Like, she'll even go like outside and yell at the hoodlums with their mecha bikes.
Yeah,
at the end of the episode.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I think that she, in a certain sense, she enjoys toying with Renton because he does give her attention, right? Like, even if it is blackmailed attention, she enjoys having him around to wait on her.
Yeah, and that's like the thing. Like, if it is like the worst kind of attention that is sort of inappropriate, like,
oh, it's super inappropriate.
You get like, I mean, this is a very like, this is a sort of common trope in anime, like the like older woman who acts inappropriately seductive towards the younger main character.
I
Usually because it reflects something about her, right? I think I'm like comparing Talho to Misato from Evangelion,
right,
for
but
example.
the difference is I don't really think that Talho has any sort of interest in Renton at all. You know,
No,
like
of
the
course
one
not.
time she
It's
tries to
just
act seductive, it's very clearly to
yeah, yeah,
screw
yeah.
with him.
It's
Like,
just it's just this thing of like it's just a manifestation of her or her loneliness or her desire for attention.
right.
And the fact that there is this age gap is not supposed to be sexy. It just shows that this woman is desperate. She's just her desire for attention manifests in
Right.
incorrect
I
ways.
mean, like, I don't think the age gap is relevant at all because, again, it's
Right.
not meant to be a romantic
That
or
like
sensual
that's what I
relationship.
meant. Like, this is
So,
not a ooh, hot lady wants to bang me. This is
like,
clearly supposed to be like pathetic and inappropriate.
well,
Like,
no, I mean, is it? That's the thing, I wouldn't even call it inappropriate because, again, that implies some sense of propriety. I don't think
I
Talho is
guess
interested in anything other than screwing with Renton for laughs. And,
that's I
like,
guess that's
she
fair.
enjoys it because she wants to be the center of attention in all ways, right? And,
Mhm.
and she teases him because that's what she does, but I don't really think that there's anything beyond a desire to have to mess around with him and all that kind of stuff.
That's fair. Yeah, I guess that's what I was trying to say. It's just the idea of like I think the idea of oh, I need to mess around with this kid to feel better about myself.
Right, but
All is
also,
pretty revealing. And
yeah, but also it's something that everybody on the ship is doing at this
right,
point in
right.
time, so it doesn't really make her special in that sense. But I think, as we go through the episode, we see a little bit more about how this particular relationship unfolds. And obviously the next step in this episode is us flying down to kind of our first look at what passes for normal
Yeah.
civilization in
Right, like
this
the
world.
surface world. I
Yeah.
gotta say, I was a little bit disappointed in that. In that, it's
Okay.
like there was some interesting stuff they do in like terms of art design. Like the city they go to sort of reminds me of a less cramped Florence, but in the end, it is still pretty much suburban Japan. With the grocery
Kind of,
stores
yeah.
as they appear in suburban Japan, with the like I think I'm a bit disappointed that they didn't put as much of the effort they put into the world building with, for example, the Trapar waves, like that thought they really put into like integrating these into the setting. That doesn't really sort of reflect into the surface world, which mostly seems to be generic fantasy town, like RPG side quest town.
Yeah. I get where you're coming from, but I also think that this is part of the uneasy mix Eureka 7 has
Hmm.
of kind of like slightly harder sci-fi and way more science fantasy
Hmm.
elements. I think the idea of this episode is to establish that people still exist in this world in
Right.
a fairly ordinary way, right?
Because we don't know that much about this world, right? We don't really
Right.
know where we are or when we are. Like up until now, we have had no idea of what society looks like, aside from the fact that there's a school that Renton goes to. There's an evil empire that seems to be like sticking its nose into everything. There are still humans. There's technology, but like there is no real semblance of what sort of society do we live in. Is it
Right.
like a based on villages? Is there an empire? Are there other nations? Is there a war going on? Is there a religion? Like they have been very very piecemeal feeding us details about the world on the surface, because we've spent most of the time in the sky.
Yeah, I think one of the points of this episode is to provide a baseline level of
Hmm.
sort of world building that allows us to take into account what we see. So, it's important to establish that this is a world in some respects quite like our own, right?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
not. Although the technology we see is very, very fantastical, it's also clearly quite rare. People are not teleporting to work or stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's a very kind of
And the thing's like
grounded world.
we've already seen some hints at the like we've seen Renton School. Like we know that there is a magazine that Gekkostate publishes. Like they have mostly firmly established that we are at least in a mirror version of the contemporary world.
Right, but I think that this episode is important for establishing not only the particulars of that, but also the tone of it, because the show
Mhm.
up to this point has been quite overtly fantastical,
Mhm.
and this I think is a slight derailment towards the more kind of grounded, hard sci-fi stuff. Not
Right.
necessarily in kind of that they're espousing any hard science here,
Mhm.
but in that we're showing that society has a recognizable form. You know, for the most
Right.
part, people
This is
still
not
live, work
yeah,
in normal ways.
like this is not a setting like for example in Star Wars where everything is dominated by this conflict where there is still a like baseline normalcy where most ordinary people just go about their business, going grocery shopping, hanging out at the mall.
Yeah,
It's
and
not a like I mean it's like a way to sort of show that because the last 4 episodes we've seen have mostly involved pretty high stakes
right.
situations, right? Ancient prophecies and mysterious MacGuffins. And in the last episode, we went on a dangerous smuggling mission and had to deal with the military. And this episode sort of points out of like, yeah, that's kind of all happening under the surface, and this society is mostly just normal,
Yeah, I
right?
think that's what they were going for, and that was the point I was trying to make. Is that
Hmm.
it's important to set an expectation for the baseline level of magic, technology, whatever you call it in this
Hmm.
world. So I think although the actual society on the ground might be a little bit anticlimactic, it's important to show that and also to a certain extent part of the part of the ongoing plot arc is Renton, having his illusions shattered and his
Hmm.
dreams sort of not destroyed, but showing him the reality behind the image of Gekkostate. And in that sense, it's important to show that they do still need to do normal stuff like
Right.
shopping and maintenance and things like that. So thematically, it contributes to that.
We go to the robot parts store, and
Yes.
I take my waif with me so she can tell me whether you're scamming me and selling me junk.
To be fair, they kind of portray the guy as having
Yeah,
inadvertently
yeah, yeah,
scammed him,
yeah,
but yes, Eureka's weird technopathy, is raised
yeah.
quite obviously here. Any any ideas why she has this?
I mean, because she's like, there's. I wanted to say because she's a mysterious waifu, but like the thing is like,
That's kind of the only thing you can say at this point. To be
right, right, but
fair,
like there's at least an indication that she has some sort of connection with Nervash, right?
yeah,
And we also know that the Misha, the doctor or the scientist lady at Gekkostate, knows her longer than the other people at Gekkostate do.
yeah,
So my guess is that she's like a freak science experiment who was rescued by Misha, and they joined Gekkostate
they are testing her, right? Like
right, and
they
like
are
she's
testing and
clearly
monitoring.
supposed to be some sort of like a human version of the I don't know what is it Adama drive, the thingies that they use to control
I mean, the compact
the
drives are the
compact
green things. The
drive,
emitter
yeah.
drive is the
Or the Amita drive.
yeah.
Yeah. I think she's like might be some sort of like attempt to create a human Amita drive, or at least
Sure.
like a human catalyst that can interact with the mechs, the KLFs on a more fundamental and deeper level than merely piloting them with
Sure,
controls and pressing buttons and
that's an
stuff.
interesting
Right.
idea, and obviously, Eureka's nature is something that we'll be exploring over the course of the whole show. So I'm not going to say yes, you nailed it, or no, you didn't. But just a note as well: the KLFs explicitly refer to the military mechs.
They're the bad guy mechs.
They're normally just LFOs.
LFOs, yes.
But yes, a couple of neat things here. There is nothing more suburban Japanese than landing at a family restaurant called Daddy's.
Oh yes, I was just about to say this episode ends with them fighting in a Denny's parking lot, which is hilarious.
Yes, very funny. Also, one of the big signs as they're walking down the street just says "Somi." Yes, that one. Yeah, so lots of details that tell you this was made in Japan. Hilda fighting for toilet paper hits home a little differently these days than it probably did in 2005.
It's more like a reference to like the weird flash sales that Japanese convenience stores.
Well, yeah, we see her fighting for like something else later, right? I can't remember what it is.
Bento style.
Something like that, yes. But, it's a fun little cutaway gag there. Mm-hmm. But yes, and also just, we go through some of the greatest hits of humiliating teen boys here with
taking him to the lingerie store.
Yeah, I mean, he's just so naive.
Oh no, Miss Talho, I can't bear the idea of seeing you in slightly less clothing than what you usually wear.
Yeah, it's the old Gurren Lagann joke, right, where Yoko shows up in a swimsuit that's actually more covering than her normal attire. But just, it does a good job of accentuating, this is like the sweetest summer child who has ever existed. He is so out of his depth. He is so gawky. He is
or the whole bit where Talho is like, scoot away, or do you want to be close to me, you weird like creep? And then he's like, no. And then she's like, oh, so you don't think I'm attractive? No, it's not that either.
Yeah, it's so
just
obvious.
The easiest mark ever.
Yeah,
like
and again, it's kind of endearing in a way because it does show you just how sheltered he is, really. He
really is like unapologetically an awkward, weird teen boy, right?
Yes.
There are so many elements of the usual anime power fantasy that have just been scraped off of this kid.
Yeah.
And to the point where I might see some people like looking at him and being like, this kid like sucks, he's spineless, whiny, self-important.
He kind of does a bit, like, and I think the difference is that although he is so gawky, it's in an endearing way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's not a creep. He's not hurting people. He's just really out of his depth.
He's just kind of pitiable in a sort of affectionate way, like you just want him. You just want to pat him on the shoulder and be like, it's gonna be all right.
Yeah. I think it's really funny that he just asks Talho, is it fun to bully me? Because of course it is. Of course it's fun to bully you. You snap like a brittle twig. It's so funny.
Using Master Talho-san.
Yes, exactly. Although in the scene where she's quote unquote drunk, it's unclear how drunk she is, but
she's anime drunk. She takes a single sip of booze and she becomes super slammed.
Yeah, it's I half expected her to do the Misato beer slam halfway through, but we do get a little bit of genuine insecurity leaking out, right? Like we get a little bit of, oh, actually, I'm messing with you because I feel underappreciated by the person I am actually.
It's just, and I don't know if this is probably not the show's fault, but it's just like, I was kind of disappointed when it was like, oh, okay, so her fig is like, I want, my entire existence is defined by being acknowledged by a man.
Yeah, it's
especially because the thing that follows immediately after is, oh, I need to be saved from sexual assault.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get onto that, but yes, that is a problem with this episode for sure. I think, with Talho, I think it's a more sympathetic take on it, in that clearly it's not necessarily that it's specifically a romantic or sexual thing. It's more that she just wants affection and
I think
recognition.
It is not an inherently wrong trope. It is just it is so often used as the standard motivation
Yeah.
for female characters, especially like, let's call it sexy female characters.
Yes.
You know, the role that Talho is supposed to fill.
It's a very easy archetype to build into, you know. And again, you know,
like next thing you'll tell me, we'll learn about her backstory, and then it'll turn out she has daddy issues.
yeah, exactly.
Like,
you know, but you know, I think it is a little sexist. You know, sexism is not an all or nothing charge. You know, we are not
Right.
saying that the episode and the show sucks because
Yeah.
Talho is kind of a sexist archetype. It's just an observation that perhaps her character could be a little bit more fully developed.
Right, and you can show empathy towards a female character. You can write a sympathetic female character while still displaying a sexist attitude. Right.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
You know, and the treatment of the female characters in this show is kind of all over the shop, and I think it's, you know, looking at the show from a feminist perspective is a very interesting way to look at it.
I mean, it's very 2000s, right?
Yeah,
it is Joss Whedon feminism, you know.
It's not that bad.
No, I mean it in a way of like,
well, it's a lot of
women characters can show strength in certain ways, but still need to meet certain cliches, or else they wouldn't be women, right?
It is a product of its time, you know.
Yeah,
and
that's the thing. Like, it's a very like 2000s view on strong female character.
Yeah,
like,
you know, and we'll see more. We will see more nuanced and more fully in-depth takes on the female characters as we go along. But
yeah, I think Eureka is generally well written up until this.
Yeah, and we'll see. You know, she'll have her own arcs to go through there. But let's move into talking about, you know, sort of the quote unquote action set piece of this episode, which is, you know, Talho storming out, trying to confront the three punks from every Kamen Rider series,
or every Yakuza game, or every every anime ever. They're blasting their hoodlum techno music out of their big speaker, Zaku robot cycle.
Those things are not Zaku's. Come on,
I know,
they don't even
but
have
like,
one eye.
No, they're not Zaku's, but they're like, what does G call them? Shit boxes, shitty grunt mechs.
The thing I was going to say about the mechs actually is I would be really interested to know if Kawamori designed these weird motorcycle mechs, because they have a very strong Pat Labor vibe to me, which of course Kawamori also worked on. But they have that sort of rugged, everydayness about them with just a
That's the cool thing, right? This looks like a cheap robot. Like, if you would go to the robot store, this would be like your budget option.
Right. And, that corresponds well with their sort of function as like cheapo motor scooters or something like that,
Man, who would even buy the MX-105? You could just tear open the cockpit with your bare hands.
Yeah, but I think that's cool. I think it's I think that the weird little pocket camera is a very 2000s touch. That is
what if the Kuroko phone was a camera?
Yes, but you're right. I do think it's disappointing that in her first Focus episode, Talho is basically useless and has to be saved by a combination of Renton and Holland. It's not an egregious example of the trope. It's not,
just like the thing is, like, what if the exact same happened, except she just punched one of those dudes in the face, and then they like use their mechs to show that actually she can take these dudes, but they're like cheating by using robots against a human.
They kind of attempt to kind of like mitigate it by making her drunk, but yes, it's not great that she kind of just goes down without.
And just the whole like, oh, you'll have to pay with your body thing is just so tired.
Yeah, it's some real like bottom of the barrel basic ass writing. At least she gets to kick that guy in the balls,
especially because it's the whole thing where they explicitly recognize her as the cover model from the magazine, as the pinup girl. So it's just like it has this slight undercurrent of, oh, you're asking for it.
Yeah, it's again, the show is a product of its time, but it's not great writing, and I would prefer if she had at least put up a bit more of a fight. I do like that Renton's attempts to help her are basically a catastrophe,
right?
Because
but it shows that he's got chutzpah. That's
right, exactly. It serves a dual purpose of showing that A, he actually cares, but B, also perhaps his intentions are a lot more noble than his actions at this point. Also, Gekkostate are short on money. I'm pretty sure that restaurant needed to be fully rebuilt.
Sir, this is a Daeres.
Yes. I also think it's kind of funny that when Holland shows up and goes full Spider-Man, like leaping 20 feet in the air and just kind of like running
he
up
literally
the arm
does the fucking like cheap shonen anime teleport.
Yes, but the shot of him running up the arm is a great little bit of animation. It's very blunt storytelling, but it is nice to see that he does care. You know, the fact that he only goes sicko mode when he discovers that his expensive purchase has been crushed is pretty funny.
I also like how like he pulls the guy away from Talho by his nostrils, and then Eureka does the same thing in the nerve ash.
Yeah, that's a really great little bit of visual synchronicity there. You know, just a really nice, just one of those touches that tells you that they cared.
Yeah.
You know, but yes,
it's just striking how like kind of gnarly the mecha fights are in this show when push comes to shove, right?
Yeah,
I mean Eureka just shows up and like brutally tears open the cockpit of one of the mooks.
I mean, nobody dies. I will point out,
nobody dies, unlike in the next episode.
Yes, but yeah, I mean, like, I think, you know, this is one of the advantages of doing kind of like smaller scale ground based mech combat, right? Is that you get a bit more crunchiness to it. You know, there's a little bit more real robot in there.
But that's the weird thing, because this show just looks like a super robot show. Like it has the cool like organic mechs with their cool laser surfing, and then when they start fighting, it's just punching and tearing and wrestling.
I mean, you know, the concept of the real to super robot axis is fraught with many complications, but the thing I would say is that this is, you know, a post Evangelion show by a lot of people who made Gundam, which means that you're going to see, you know, a certain level of aesthetics from both sides of the balance. I would say on you know, if you put a gun to my head, I would say that Eureka is more of a super robot show than a real robot show, but it's taking bits and pieces from.
I mean, it is in that nebulous in between area where most mecha shows operate.
Right, exactly. You know, and again, you know, the concept of the two axes is so very vague that it's hard to say, you know. But all's well that ends well in the end, you know, and we do get a lovely set of shots to kind of finish up this episode, you know, sailing against the sunset. Just again, one of those really romantic, beautiful bits of imagery that the show pulls out.
Just having this
all the time,
romantic good time with this drunk lady who reminds you of your older sister.
Yes, you know. And
you smelled really great, by the way. Thanks for that information.
I've never understood anime's weird obsession with saying ladies smell nice. Like, sure, I'm sure ladies do smell nice, but like it's you know, sense memory is a thing, sure, but I don't get it.
I guess maybe it's just an easy shorthand for like puberty making you like weirdly aware of other people's bodies, and like having a character say like, oh, she smells great is sort of like an easy shorthand for like, oh, this kid is awakening to his sexuality in a slightly weird way. Like, I
guess, you know, but it's such a cliche of anime at this point, is that it just kind of comes across as weird and a little pervy occasionally. I do like this revelation, this sequence of shots at the end where everybody's like, yeah, dude, we know you're down bad for Eureka because we're not blind. Like, did you think we were blind? And again, it just speaks to Renton's absolute naivete when it comes to actual human relations.
Every teenage boy falls in love and thinks he is the first person ever to fall in love.
Yes, exactly. You know, but it's just like a funny, nice way of kind of looping that around, you know. And we get Talho giving Renton a little more respect in the end, although not a much. You know,
I mean, we still have many episodes to go.
Yes, you know,
she has a role to play.
Indeed, there. But yes, I mean, arguably a filler episode, but
an important, like
yeah.
a thing that an episode that shows why filler is a good thing, actually.
Yeah,
and not
absolutely.
like
You use your filler to develop your characters, to develop your world. I
Yeah.
liked this one a lot. Actually,
Oh.
I think that it's a really fun introduction to Talho as a full on character, and it's just a fun little romp.
Yeah,
a
it's
good, a
just a
good little adventure
funny, goofy
there.
bit
Um,
of a breather after the quite intense, well, for Eureka 7 standards, I guess,
yeah,
opening episodes.
absolutely. So before we move on to episode 6. Childhood, we're going to play Aqua's music quiz.
Oh, I do
So,
want to say one thing.
yeah.
The next episode preview for episode 6 promises that Renton will go to battle with the children, which is incredibly funny.
It's kind of correct, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's do the music quiz here. So episode 5 is called Vivid Bit. Do you know what this is a reference to?
I mean, I did not know, but I must admit I cheated a little bit and I did look this one up.
Okay.
And I was sort of baffled that apparently it's a reference to a Western song. So
Yes.
it's a reference to the song "Vivid" by the band Electronic.
Yes.
Which is a band I had never heard of, which is weird because it's Electronic are a supergroup consisting of two of the most important musicians of the last, let's say, 50 years of British history, namely Johnny Marr, the guitarist from the Smiths.
Yes,
the member of the guitarist, songwriter, and only member of the Smiths.
Yeah, I was going to say the member of the Smiths that it's all right to like.
And the other one is Bernard Sumner, who was, of course, the guitarist and keyboardist for Joy Division, later frontman of New Order, who made the song Blue Order, which we have talked about in the song before.
No, they made the song Blue Monday. It's
Blue Monday,
the name of the podcast.
Blue Monday, obviously. So these two guys teamed up and formed a supergroup in the 90s called Electronic, where they sort of like pioneered this kind of mix of alternative rock and electronic dance music that would later lead to like the big beat bands like the Chemical Brothers and the Prodigy and stuff.
I mean, I think it's quite a logical extension of the stuff that New Order were doing in the late 80s there, It's a weird
thing, right? Because it is both simultaneously more and less rock than what New Order were doing.
Right.
Like it goes more all in on using newest technologies, because Sumner explicitly founded Electronic because the other members of New Order didn't allow him to use synthesizer programming. They wanted to do everything analog.
And, Electronic has a bit more, I would say, bit more dance, bit more techno influence than...
Because but then on the other hand, there's also Johnny Marr there, who comes from a very, classic guitar band, jangling with your electric guitars.
The Smiths are the definitive alternative rock band in Britain. They are to the British what REM are to the US.
They are the jangle band.
Yes, absolutely.
Jangly guy, jangly guitars, a guy like singing in a monotone lyrics, voice, mumbly, weird, poetic lyrics.
Yeah. I should also point out as well that a lot of their songs were co-written by the Pet Shop Boys, another famous electronic group. So, again, this is one of the more high-profile references here. Now,
it's just weird that I had never heard of this band before, because I'm a fan of the Smiths, I'm a fan of New Order, I'm a fan of Joy Division. I did not know these two guys made music together.
There were the British music scene is so weird and incestuous, especially around this time, that there were a lot of small two-man supergroups and stuff like that.
And the thing is, supergroups are almost never as good as the sum of their parts, so most of them sort of fade into obscurity.
Yeah. But how about
everyone knows of the Traveling Wilburys, but does anyone know a song by the Traveling Wilburys?
Handle with Care.
Okay, sure, whatever.
Nobody knows a second song, however. How about episode 6, Childhood? Do you know this one? This one's pretty wide-ranging, so it's...
Right, that's the thing. There are so... childhood.
Yeah.
I can't immediately think of a song named that or a band named that, but it's such a ubiquitous theme.
And there will be more obvious ones coming up.
Right.
I will say that this is a reference to a track by the famous... American DJ and producer Jeff Mills, also known
Oh.
as the Wizard. There,
Yeah.
you know,
See, the
pioneered.
thing is, like, this show kind of taps into a hiatus in my music knowledge. I don't know that much about old
Right.
electronic music,
which is why I thought
like-
it would be funny to try and make you work it out. But yes, he's
it's
part
like,
of the
Kraftwerk were pretty good, huh?
he's part of the Detroit techno underground
Right,
scene there.
yes.
Very, very well known underground electronic artist there,
Mhm.
and he has a song called Childhood, which this is a reference to there. So speaking of which, let's move on to episode 6, Childhood. And as the name might suggest, this is a story mostly about children.
Tag along, kids! Yay!
Namely,
it's a Super
Renton-
Sentai episode.
Yeah, namely Renton versus Eureka's children, who do not like him.
Who tried to kill him? They straight up tried to kill him.
They try and kill him several times.
Yeah.
In fact, but let's start off. I really like the intro to this episode. Just the running. It's a really kinetic way to start us off. It gives us a good glimpse at some of the, just the crew going about their.
And again, those
lives.
two guys who were blocking the entire corridor with their weird picnic were kind of asking for it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of a hippie commune right there, but it's just a nice action.
Not enough public sex.
So, we spoke a little bit about the children on the last episode.
Mhm.
I mentioned that a lot of people find them irritating and annoying. G mentioned that he found them irritating and annoying.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, so before we go into the particulars of the episode, this is the first time that we really get to know them as a unit, as individual characters. How do you feel about them, just based on this one episode?
I mean, how do I feel about them? I feel about them the way I felt about them last time, which is they are a manifestation of everything Renton does not want to be. He does not want to be a kid. He thinks kids are annoying. He thinks kids are stupid. They get between him and Eureka. They bother him. And that is kind of what they're meant to be in the show. They don't really have individual personalities per se. They're just a hive mind representing
to a certain extent. I would say that they grow more individual personalities as time goes. I guess my question really was, do you personally find them annoying? Do you think that they are getting in the way of your enjoyment of the show?
Absolutely not. Right. I think they they are obviously supposed to be annoying in a certain, because that is what they're here for. They are an obstacle. They are a reminder of what Renton does not want to be. But I do not find them grating outside of the extent to which they are supposed to be annoying.
Sure.
Right?
Well, we will see how you feel as we go along.
It's the thing of do people hate your villain because he's effective, or do people hate your villain because he's stupid?
Yeah,
and I think here the kids are annoying in a good way rather than, even though it's a lot of cliches, we caused trouble by goofing off, and we are irrationally obsessed with this kid, and we try to murder him in cartoonish ways.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's irrational. Children can become very fixated on people, and I don't think anything that is depicted here is grossly out of character. But we'll see. As I've said in the past, the children are one of the more divisive aspects of the show. I think this is a fairly good intro episode to them. I liked this episode more than I remember liking it, and I think there's some fun touches here. I think that it's very funny that even the children know Renton is a child.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It just shows that to a child, another child is just a child. Whereas if you're a slightly older child, younger children are babies.
Yeah. Also, that Talho has perhaps been teaching them some inappropriate insults to sling at Renton there. Also, I'm not sure if you caught this because it's fairly quick, but when they leave the room, Maurice gives Renton the bird. like,
Yes.
which I thought was super funny because I hadn't noticed it before. But yes,
I mean, it's because when he closes the door, it's also
Yeah.
there's also graffiti of someone giving him the bird, right?
yes, right, and I understand that in Japanese culture it is not quite as offensive as
Right.
it's meant to be, but it's still very funny. I just it's very funny when children swear. I can't help it, you know. Couple of notes here. We get our kind of main intro to a new member of the Gekkostate crew here, who is the weird computer expert Was,
Mhm.
with his hairband and kind of like perpetual stoner
Yeah,
eyes.
his weird like froggy who kind of looks
Yes.
like a frog.
He is named after Steve Wozniak, the famous Apple founder,
Ah,
hence the name Was.
yes,
Uh,
obviously.
but yes, that
I
that
mean,
is where
that's
that comes from.
if you are looking for an appropriate name for a computer geek, that's
Exactly.
probably the best
Yes.
possible name.
Um, we get a little more background on Eureka here, where we find out that actually nobody actually knows how old
Right.
Eureka
There's the
is.
really like funny remark where Matthew, I think, is like,
Yeah.
"Oh, but I can tell from her figure that she is like 15 to 16-year-old." I'm like, "Dude, what the fuck are you talking
Well,
about? Like girls between the age of 12 and 18. Like look at a teen girl and she can
yeah.
be any way between 12 and 18 because
Well,
that's how female puberty works." Like,
also, I like the rest of the crew immediately call him out as a pervert, which
yeah,
is
yeah.
absolutely the correct. The
Also,
correct.
I guess in 2005 we were still like translating lolicon as lolicon, huh?
I mean, it's it's a very difficult word to translate with exactly the same meaning, but yes,
I guess, yeah.
but as it's a funny joke, but it also tells us something interesting, which is Eureka might not be Renton's age. She could be anything. Nobody's
Right,
quite
right.
sure. Like Mathieu is making, let's call it an educated
I mean,
guess,
that's the
but
thing. Like, it shows that they don't really know much about Eureka, right?
correct. Yes, nobody's quite sure how old she is. Quick note here. We hear our ending music there,
Yep.
Kibono Sora. I also think that there's this scene between Renton and Eureka in the hangar is very sweet.
Hmm.
I think that it's we get more kind of like weird stuff about Renton and his sister. But in general, I think that it shows that Eureka cares about the children. She doesn't quite know. She doesn't quite have the instinctive understanding of parenting that a real parent, an adult
Hmm.
parent, would have, right?
I mean,
But she
she constantly
cares,
asks him if she's being a good mom, right?
right? And it's clearly something she cares about, but has no context for actually
It also
actually
just
judging.
says so much about the other Gekkostate people that she is left in charge of these kids.
I mean, I think my read was always that the other Gekkostate people, and by that I mean mostly Misha, who is like the
Hmm.
only responsible person here, see it as like a good exercise for her to learn human
The
emotion and
ways of the
human.
real world. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly,
yeah.
yes. We get a very brief cutaway where Holland sees that.
Yeah, she's Huey Lewis or whatever his name
I'm
is.
going to call him that from now on, but it's
Huey
Dewey.
Lewis without the news.
Yes, it's Dewey.
Do you
Did you?
like Huey Lewis in the news?
The Power of Love is a great song.
That's
That's
when they
all
really came into their own.
That's all I'm prepared to say on this matter. Did you notice the book that Holland is reading?
Yes, it's the same book that Huey Lewis is reading. I did
Correct.
write
The
that down.
Golden Bough.
Except Holland is, of course, reading it because there's a naked lady on the cover, not because of the interesting insights in the intersection between, what is it, faith and mythology or faith and magic?
Religion, magic, mythology.
Yeah,
Kind of like
yeah.
the human condition of.
He probably picked it up
combining
because he
them.
thought it was a girly mag.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, I don't think it's too difficult to say that from his reaction, he is familiar with
Right.
Dewey.
With the Kingslayer, Huey Lewis.
Yes, he does call him the King's Murderer, doesn't he? That will be delved into later, but it's the beginning of a connection.
It's interesting, right? Because you'd think the empire, the authorities, the army are working for the monarchy, and then there's this thing of like, why would they work together with a person who I'm assuming wanted to disrupt that by assassinating a previous king?
I mean, I'm going to ask one question, which is, why do you assume that Kingslayer is literal rather than metaphorical?
I
Yeah,
mean,
we will see. No,
there's the thing, because like Holland does follow up with like, but that king was ... So
yes.
yeah, I don't know.
We will see. You know, that is obviously just there to plant a seed, which we will explore in
It's just
future developments.
that character of Hugh, like the character I keep calling Huey Lewis, gives me like real Full Metal Alchemist vibes. Like
I mean, in the sense that he's like raggedy looking and has long hair and kind of...
He just has that kind of design, and like the way they talk about him and the role they give him is sort of reminiscent of how certain characters in Full Metal Alchemist are talked about.
And
like,
of course, there is a legacy here. Bones
obviously,
also made Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah.
So I think at least some of the artistic crossover can be explained there. I'd never really thought of him looking that way before, but I guess he does. He's a little bit less...
I mean, it's the like braid, and like men with braids is just something I associate with Full Metal Alchemist, because you don't see it that often in character designs except in Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, right. Like, but I mean, like, we'll see. Dewey obviously will be somebody we see a lot more of going forward there. But this episode also marks the beginning of a weird tradition for this show, which is the unusual number of dialogue scenes which take place while somebody is in the toilet. Like, we'll see more but like there's a weird number of like important dialogue scenes that happen while people are hanging out in a bathroom, and this marks the first one of them.
It is a place where men can gather and lay themselves bare.
Indeed, yes, that's certainly one way of looking at it. I think the animation of Renton careening down the corridor here is very good.
Yeah. And then the elephant bit, which is a classic visual gag in anime.
Yeah, that's a classic anime.
Yeah. It's just like the implication of that scene is that they did something to him.
Well, I think the implication is fairly obvious that they cartooned something onto his dick.
Yeah.
Which, he must be a pretty heavy sleeper, is all I'm saying there.
Now we can add sexual assault to the list of these children's crimes.
I think the particularly bad one in this episode is where they try and shake him off of
off
the 20-foot ladder, which is like... In the last episode, Renton was hit round the head with a golf club, something which would normally kill someone.
Oh, yeah.
Here, he falls off that massive ladder. Firstly, how did he get to the top of that ladder? Because that ladder only has like 6 rungs. Secondly, how is he not dead?
He is made of anime main character plasticine.
Yeah, exactly, yes. But, we also learn that there is no security on the Gekkostate at all. Anyone can do whatever they want at any point in time, such as wandering into the highly secret radar jammer room.
Security is for the man.
Yes, but how has this not happened before?
Because they're understaffed. Like,
yeah, but no, that's what I'm saying. How has it not happened before now? Or maybe it has, and they just keep putting up with it. Link has some real serious attachment issues. Like, yes, he is the youngest, but there's a real possessiveness there to Eureka, which is...
It's almost as if his real mother was taken from him in some traumatic way or another.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see, won't we? I think it's interesting that Renton is perceptive enough to recognise parallels in his own childhood with the children, right? Like, I think this is the first time we've seen Renton be self-reflective and kind of like meaningfully, right? Like not he's kind of like tortured pining for Eureka, but he actually recognizes, this is something that I have done myself.
This is something what children do, and I have been a kid.
Yes.
It's also like the first time we actually we have seen his sister before, and we don't really see her in much detail here.
She does speak.
It is the first time that she speaks, and we kind of get an idea of what kind of relationship they had.
Yeah,
when they were living together.
And I think it's clear that their relationship was less siblings and more a parental substitute, right? Like, clearly there is a large age gap between them, but Renton very clearly treated his sister as a mother in some extent. I think it's a cute story. I think the visual of little Renton running away with the shoes is very cute, and
Renton wears women's shoes.
But yes, it's cute. We get a reappearance from Supercar here.
For the
insert song.
Good to hear that song.
Like I said, we will hear it quite a lot. Mater actually points out that this is the first time that Renton has flown the Nirvash himself.
That is true.
And he does okay.
And they sort of hand wave it. It's like, oh yeah, I was in charge of moving, the LMOs the LFOs whenever my grandpa was working on them, and I picked something up by watching Eureka, and it's like, yeah, kid, I watched my parents drive a car for like 18 years, and that made me instantly be able how to drive a car.
It's anime.
It's standard anime.
It's anime magic, and they do at least give a fairly flimsy, but there is an excuse why they do not just blow him out of the air.
Right, and there is a sort of like implicit acknowledgement in mecha anime that piloting a mecha is more about like you control it like 60% with your mind and the other 40% by like moving some switches.
Yeah, we can't get into the how do mecha actually get controlled because it is a pit without bottom.
You buy a $200 Steel Battalion controller.
Yeah, I mean the only halfway realistic method of controlling mecha is like the full body motion capture stuff, like the mobile trace system in G Gundam. But anything where like you are controlling a figure with pedals and levers is just absolutely insane. So it's just
with a steering wheel, like in Super Sentai.
No, that's perfectly realistic.
You spin the wheel to make it go forward.
Yes, but yeah, I think that the animation is not great here, I will say. But it is a solid little romp for Renton and the kids.
It's functional. And we just go to pull a prank on this military outpost.
Well, I mean, it's a prank which also serves to protect the Gekko from being detected by their radar.
Right. It's a two birds, one stone kind of situation.
Yeah.
Also, the army headquarters has a big football on it, which just makes me think that this evil army is just an offshoot of an already existing evil organization, namely FIFA.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's meant to be a radome, right?
Yes, but it just looks like a big football.
Come on, the evil army aren't that evil. But yeah, I do like that, when actual KLFs show up, they point out that Renton has his limits. He cannot outfly actual trained.
I just love how this commander dude is like, this kid pulled an innocent prank on us. Kill him with all of our heavy duty military equipment.
Yeah, they put up quite a flack screen there. I will say that this dude's command chair very Gundam-esque.
Yeah.
We get another first long tradition of Eureka 7 maneuvers, which is jumping out of a robot and falling into another robot and somehow not dying. This happens a lot as well.
Like it's like a little throwback to what happens in the first episode, right?
Yeah, no, it's cool as hell. It's just, crazy.
Also, like the cockpit of the Nirvash is exactly as big as it needs to be to accommodate any number of people.
Absolutely, yes. It is very, very flexible. Even if you take into account that Eureka and Renton are not full-sized adults, there's some serious shape-shifting happening here.
The cutback drop turret returns.
And
it slices a dude in half.
Yeah, we do get some weirdly Ava-esque bleeding robot stuff on.
I mean, I think the implication is that there's the blood from the dude who was piloting the robot.
I think that might be a stretch, but
what else would it be? Like they straight up killed two dudes. Like,
I mean, they are killing a lot of people. Let's be clear. But I think in this world, the cockpits for LFOs are
they're in the heads, right?
In the heads,
that is true.
For the most part, or next to the heads in the case of the Nirvash. So, but yes, it's a weird. Like, I don't think there's any deeper meaning meaning to it beyond we wanted like a stylish touch.
We want this to look like Ava, yeah.
Yeah, but yes, it is a little bit weird compared to like, the pink explosions that most of the other ones go up in.
This is very funny that it's like, well, you turned us into a fight with lethal force. Can't blame us if we kill your dudes.
I mean, like, I think it's kind of important to like, Gekkostate don't mess around, right?
Yeah,
like, there's no sort of taunting the military.
I mean, that's the thing.
here.
Like, they don't need a reason to kill imps, right?
They're outlaws, I do like this scene between Holland and like the senior crew here that shows that yes, obviously they know he did it to cover for the kids. Right, like they're not stupid. They understand the thing that the audience understands, which is obviously he wouldn't have done it if he wasn't trying to cover for the kids. I think this is a good moment for Holland as well.
Yeah,
right,
he's not mad, just disappointed.
Well, also, but like it shows he's stepping up. Like he understands that in a certain extent, he has a role as a father figure, and the crew have a role as parental figures.
That's a very important thing, right?
Right.
It's just he has a really weird line there where he says that like Renton has never known an adult figure in his life, or like he's never been surrounded by adults. And it's like, dude, what are you talking about? He has his grandpa, he has his sister. Like, Renton has known authority figures. He just has never known a authority figure that can play the role that he wants the authority figure to play, right? He has not had a father figure.
Right. I think, and again, I can't say how much of that is kind of like ambiguous translation and how much of it is just kind of like imprecise writing. But I think what he's trying to say is that, right? Like his sister is not an adult figure, she's a lot older than him, but it's implied she's still a teenager herself,
right?
Then,
and she could not provide in the guidance that Renton needs from an adult, right?
And his grandfather, I think, we spent a long time establishing that Renton primarily sees his grandfather as an antagonistic force,
as an obstacle.
He is someone he is in conflict with. So I think that's what Holland is trying to say.
That makes sense, yeah. It's just funny because it's like it acknowledges the whole thing where in anime there are only 4 ages. Kid, teen, 20-something, and old.
Yes.
And it's like, well, an old man is obviously not an adult. We are the only adults.
Yeah. but like I said, I think it is important because it shows that even though Holland is doing a pretty lousy job of being a role model, he does at least understand that he's meant to be one. Right. Like, and
the thing is, he only understands it when he can throw children in jail, which is funny.
Hey, man, ship discipline, and I think that this final scene is very good.
Oh, it's very good. Yeah.
It's cute. I think that it thaws the children out a bit. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Although I think Maurice giving Renton a picture of Eureka is kind of creepy, honestly. Like, it's especially
but it is like something that a kid would do, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you like this girl? Here's a picture of her. Like,
also, she's my mom, but
yeah,
and I also think that it's good that we see Eureka here, and she understands that this is an important act of solidarity.
Mm-hmm. So she shows solidarity towards the kids as well, right?
But she doesn't quite understand why. It's because she asks him, is it because you're an adult? Is it because you're a boy? She doesn't quite understand why he is taking the punishment. And again, it's a good demonstration of the fact that she understands that he is doing it out of moral principle, but she doesn't understand what the principle actually is.
And neither does Renton, really, right? Because he's like, well, I don't know, I'm Renton, like I'm just me, I'm just doing what I think is the right thing, right?
I mean, I think he understands that he is taking responsibility for his actions, right? Like that he did the crime and now he must do the time, so to speak. And that's an important advancement for his character, right? He realizes...
On the other hand... sorry,
go on. No.
I was just going to say, maybe he's also doing it because the brig seems a lot more comfortable than that tent he has to stay in normally.
Oof. Maybe, yeah. At least he has a flushing toilet.
Yeah.
But yes, and it's a nice scene. It is a wonderful final line. I
Yeah.
really, really like. It's corny as hell. I like it a lot, and like I said, I liked this episode a lot more than I remember.
Yeah, it's a
Liking
great
it,
episode. I mean, we've only had great episodes up until now.
Yeah, I just think, because again, my primary memory of watching this show is when I was much younger. I was not quite as young as G, but it was a long time ago. And I like the children, but I think that they can be quite abrasive sometimes. And I think this
because you're like, when you say I was a lot younger, that's probably because of that you like find these children annoying, right? Because I think like the younger you are, the more sensitive you are to people younger than you being annoying.
Yes, absolutely. And I like that is borne out in this episode in how Renton is way more annoyed at the kids than anybody else, quite frankly. But I think that, coming back and watching this, I think that this episode is important in emotional terms, because it shows Renton, like, in a real way, this is the first time Renton has taken any agency since joining the crew on the Gekko, right? Like,
it's also an important episode for Eureka and Holland, right? Because they both come into like dealing with their role as quote unquote parents, with their responsibility and the role that they can play in guiding, the people who look up to them, whether that is Renton or the three children, towards the right path.
Yeah, and there's some very light intertextuality between Eureka being a parental figure to the children and Holland being a parental figure to Renton and Eureka.
Oh, damn, themes in my anime.
I know, right? It's crazy. Anything else you wanted to say about these two episodes before we wrap up?
Only that the next episode will apparently feature Renton having to do the only job worse than indebted servitude to Gekkostate, namely being a gig worker delivering pizzas.
Yeah.
And also, his hair finally grows out. Because he has a mustache.
Yes. Take that, Talho. I remember liking the next episode a lot, so we'll see. It's definitely one of the most memorable episodes for me, so we'll see. Next time we are going to be watching episode 7, Absolute Defeat, and episode 8, Glorious Brilliance. 2 interesting episodes. That's all I'll say there.
So clearly they said that the character of Huey Lewis killed the king. Now, the use of the term king in this term is, of course, a reference to famous rock and roll musician Elvis Presley, who was really also known as the king.
That's it. No, we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Aqua, for being my partner on this endeavor. And please, subscribe to the podcast in all the usual places: Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify. Oh God, I can never remember them all. YouTube, all of that good stuff. I
think those are the only ones that still exist.
We'll see. Anyway, but thank you, everyone who's listening, as always, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks.
Bye.